One, two,
Standing
go.
by. You know it.
Here we go.
Hey everybody, you're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your hairy heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy heavy homo to listen in. We are international tonight. I don't know how else to put it. You see the gentleman who's in my middle. I don't know if everybody else has the same view, but he's a familiar name. Been on our show a couple times in the past. Mr. Nottingham himself, David Hazan.
Hello,
Thank
hello.
you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And David is here to talk about some of his new projects. There is the extension of the Nottingham universe and Tales of Nottingham. But more importantly, there's a new book coming out from Scout Comics, Death Drop Drag Assassin. And also, this time again from Mad Cave, who puts out Nottingham. We have, it just...
Monomyth.
Monomyth. Yes, it just flew by me here. Monomyth, a magic-based series. And the letterer for both of those series is the other gentleman that's joining us tonight, and that's Lucas Gattoni. Lucas, thank you very much for joining us. And as people see there, Lettering Bear, that's also your Twitter handle. We're very happy to have you here tonight.
That's me. Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here with you tonight.
All right, awesome. So, regulars, gentlemen, how you doing tonight?
We're doing good.
Yeah.
I'm doing good.
Yeah, I see.
Got a glass of wine. It was a good day. I can't complain.
That's good. That's good.
And no crazy storms, no tornadoes, nothing.
I was like all Caleb Rage at the gym today, though. New project starting up at work, and it was hinky. So I went and lifted things.
I actually skipped the gym today. I opted, so I did a little bit of cardio, but that's a different story. But
good for you.
Wow.
That's all I'm going to say. Good for you. All right. Well, we got a lot to talk about tonight. And in the past, I've always had this reputation of kind of bogarting interviews. So right off the bat, we're not going to do that. I'm passing that interview baton over to Steve. Steve, why don't you take us through the initial stage of the interview with our two guest gentlemen here?
Why, thank you. I will take that baton. For those of you who have been watching our show or listening to our show for a while, you may be already familiar with David Hazan, who has been on our show before to talk about Nottingham and other projects. One of the things that we like to do for new listeners, new viewers, is to have the guests reintroduce themselves and also talk about what got them into comics in the first place. And you don't have to say too much because I know you've already been on here before. You've already been asked that question, but it is a nice little reminder for people who who are new to know a little bit more about David and what brought David to comics.
I was never into comics as a kid. I was always into comics related media. And some of my colleagues a few years ago got really sick of me talking about that media without having read the source material, and so started shoving books in my hands. And the first book they actually shoved in my hands was Batwoman Elegy. And that kind of took me on a wild ride where I was like, okay, this is incredible. Now I want to do this. And so I just kind of started, as it were, no pun intended, tumbling down the rabbit hole.
Which is awesome. And Batwoman's I'd say it's a pretty good introduction.
That's
and Lucas.
Elegy was the J.H. Williams run, correct?
Yeah. Greg Rucka, J.H. Williams.
You've got no choice but to become a comics fan when you read that.
And Lucas, same question. So, what brought you into comics? Where did you start getting into comics?
Oh well, when I was a kid, I really loved superheroes. We didn't get much comic books in here. I'm from Argentina. We didn't get many superhero comic books, but I really loved Superman, Batman from the movies and the 60s TV show, which was really big in Latin America. So when some comic books started getting here in the early 90s, well, that's when I really started collecting. I remember I bought a Batman and the Outsiders, Team Aparo, and Team Aparo. I remember. I don't remember the right. And then a big book came out with a lot of ads in the TV and in uh, newspapers. It was the death of Superman, and that's when I got really hooked. And from then on, I'm really a big comic book reader, actually. And from then on, since I'm a graphic designer, I always try to get into working. And a couple of years ago, I finally had my chance as a letterer.
Awesome. That's cool. I mean, a lot of people sort of have that moment where there's a particular book or a particular, series that comes out that just it's what does it. I mean, you said that you kind of have comics in the media, comics sort of in the culture that pops up. You see Superman movies, Batman shows, the MCU movies all over the place nowadays. Characters and stuff might be known, but just getting that comic that really hooks you, sometimes that's all it really takes. Where it's like, oh, there's more to this.
Yes, that was right.
Yeah.
So Lucas, I'm curious. You mentioned a couple of most of the superhero titles you mentioned were DC characters, but you mentioned that the '90s was really when it wrapped in. Was Image Comics, had they made their way down to Argentina or to any of the South American kind of the industry yet, or was it mostly just Big Two Fair?
There were many little publishers here,
Mm-hmm.
and that published comics in Spanish. Yes, the Spanish versions of the books, and they were mostly DC and a little bit Marvel.
Okay.
And there was a big publisher in Spain, and we got some of those comic books too. I live in Cordoba. It's not the biggest city in Argentina. It's not Buenos Aires. So we didn't get as many comic books from the original US comic books. So it was mostly DC and Marvel. And then in the mid-90s, we started getting some original books from the States. And I think actually my brother got Spawn and Savage Dragon. And those were the two first indie books I read, actually.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. They're good ones. And David, because you weren't reading comics at that time, with Australia, I mean, you have a very different sort of like comics history, a lot that's aligned with probably the UK, I would think. But I'm sure there's also a lot of American books that would have come through, plus some
look,
homegrown stuff.
I couldn't comment on what did and didn't come through then. I'm not sure it's aligned in either respect, other than that, as long as I've been reading comics, we obviously get everything. I couldn't tell you what it was like then.
Back in the Dark Ages,
Steve, I was born in 1992. I have no idea.
For those of you who are just listening to the podcast, Bill just rolled his eyes so far back in his head. I think his neck just went all the way back.
Y'all,
we're glad he's muted, apparently.
y'all, I'm not the youngest one on the show.
I'm everybody's daddy. That's just the way it is. Or Poppy. I get that.
Or boss.
Oh no, I don't. No, that's too far. It's a bridge too far, Bill.
Oh well, but that's also it's always great to get other perspectives, and I think especially in the past 10, 15, even 20 years, there's been so much I would say more international creators that are brought in and brought to the States and exported out, that there's just a lot more collaboration, I think, internationally, that there's talent everywhere, and it's a lot easier for that to be shared among in this industry, especially, I think, with the growth of so many different indie book,
it's one industry where I
publishers.
think the advancements in
Yeah.
technology have made what was previously impossible possible.
Yeah.
In terms
Yeah.
of there were there were situations in the past. DC used to get a lot of artists from Latin America in the 70s, but it really the internet changed a lot for this industry. It changed a lot.
Well, I mean, the first protocol for any indie writer is to go and find an artist on the internet, especially since for me I don't have access to the kinds of shows that you guys all have. It's the scale is much smaller, and the industry is much smaller here, and there are some standout people, but finding somebody to collaborate with would be significantly harder without the internet. That's how I connected with Lucas. I can't remember exactly how, but but that's that's the beauty of the community, the online indie comics community, is that it brings people together.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes,
that's great.
I honestly wouldn't have a career without internet. To be honest,
Yeah.
I tried getting into comic books like 10, 12 years ago, when internet was not such a fast thing. Okay, and I couldn't do it. I wasn't able to. And the main thing was that there wasn't too many payment options, so that made things quite more difficult too. But then again, I tried like 6 years ago, and then it was a whole different scene.
Mm.
And I know I have a career thanks to the internet coming.
Look,
Yeah.
Lucas, I'm curious. So when we think of comics artists, we think of things like Instagram makes it very easy for comic artists to share their work. But from a graphic design perspective and from a lettering perspective, what tools have you used, or what avenues have worked for you to get yourself out there, as far as these are my lettering talents, or I know you did some translation work as well, between Spanish and English. So what tools have you been able to use to showcase your particular skills or skills related to lettering, as opposed to just visual artists who pencilers and inkers?
Well, I basically started Googling when I wanted to get into it. I started Googling tutorials on the internet, and many of them had like blank pages and pages of script that you could practice. So I went on, and then I did like 5 pages of practice I found online in an old forum. I think it's not online still. Digital webbing, I think it was called. Digital web. I basically prepared an online portfolio with 5 practice pages, and the next day I already had a job lettering a small book with a very small publisher that never paid me. Okay, for almost 100 pages, but okay, I still use that as a portfolio to get the next small job, and then the next small job, and then some less smaller jobs, maybe. And it's just like like a little ladder. And networking for me was mostly done on Twitter. And it helped me a lot to connect with other letterers. The lettering community is quite generous and quite open to newcomers. So since I was already a graphic designer, I was also a pre-press manager. So I have a lot of experience in printing issues. So a couple of big letterers today, so I kind of give them advice and became friends that way. And that led to some really big jobs that I've been having. So it's mostly networking and showing yourself, and I think being generous about what you know and what you can share with others. That's at least that's what has worked for me.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And David, for the projects that you've had that are coming out now, as a writer, do you have certain situations that are, similar to Lucas, where it's, depending on how you network? I mean, obviously, working with Mad Cave, that's always really great, especially after the success of Nottingham. But for, finding other avenues and other publishers, have you found it to be a lot easier just, with the people that you've met in the industry, other creatives that have, gotten to know you and gotten to know your work? Has that actually been extremely helpful for you?
Oh, for sure. I feel like, to me, when somebody asks me what it's actually like to do this job, my answer is always it's 80% all of that stuff and 20% actually writing. Between like marketing, promoting, networking, just general admin, it's 80% of that stuff and 20% actually writing. And yeah, I feel like you have to constantly network, constantly remind editors that you exist and you're, available for work, and that's just the gig. But also, I've had incredibly rewarding interactions, for from that networking, including having your heroes give you pull quotes for your books. That's pretty cool. And yeah, I made my first convention trek out and got to hang out with Bill for a little bit in New York, and that was pretty exciting, and that's given me a lot of connections I would never have had access to otherwise. So I'd say the internet's great. In person is also a different kind of great. But yeah, I'm constantly hustling. That's kind of how you have to be if you want more work. And even with Mad Cave, I'm constantly talking to them about the next thing, even though I've, still got 2 issues of this thing to finish and 3 issues of the other thing. So you've got to be constantly laying the groundwork for the next thing.
I've always been so impressed with the creators that we talk to on the show and that I've met at conventions, and just how many projects they're projects on top of projects on top of projects. It's like, okay, well, this one is finally coming out. You've seen issue number 1. By the way, I'm already 3 projects in on some other things that you're not going to see for another 6 to 12 months, but they're there. I'm working on it, and I'm already starting to sell my next project. And it's just that constantly thinking ahead and working ahead and trying to pull in another option. I think that's
yeah. Honestly, I am starting to be like, all right, I need to like wind down and be more strategic about what I do, because like the day job started to really eat into my time at the moment. So I'm trying to find that balance between all of these things, and it's not easy. So
Well, I'm curious.
Work in progress.
I'm curious then. That's kind of a good kind of segue to another question. So I know, David, you have a day job, and it's very similar to some other stuff that we do. But at what point, or do you see yourself going full-time comics? So I've always been curious of that, and I've spoken to my friend. I'm fairly good friends with Justin Jordan. I'm not sure if you guys know him, But we had that conversation one time where he was just reaching a point where he's like, I feel like I can make this transition. So as somebody who hasn't made that transition yet, what just as the industry goes, like what does that look like for you? What do you think that kind of transition will allow you to do? Or like what will it take to get you there?
I think it's going to take a hell of a lot to get me there. I think realistically, the transition to full time will require me doing a lot of non-comics writing work. That's kind of the next avenue for the latter half of this year for me, is
Okay.
trying to get novels and TV stuff over the line and just try and develop some of that stuff. Realistically, it is a goal for me to write full time. Whether or not it eventuates, I'm not particularly sort of fussed about whether or not it actually happens. But it is something to aspire to. The way the industry is going, it's very difficult to see how that would be just comics. Like Lucas, I have had recent experience of publishers not paying. I hope that corrects itself. And I'm not talking about small publishers either. So I'm really hoping that corrects itself in the next few months, and that project gets back on track, because that would be lovely. And you know what? The people directly involved with me in that situation are great. It's just an unfortunate situation.
Right.
Not to speak too much in innuendo, but
No. I mean, certainly there's such things that don't need to be shared and that can't be. But no, I mean, I understand that completely. So I was just kind of curious from that perspective. And it's, I know people who work in both worlds, where they do have full-time art jobs, they have full-time writing jobs, or where they do their comics writing in one part and they write for other, be it television or film or even different types of media, where writing is still a full-time job. It's just not full-time in comics. So I was curious about where that kind of transition lied for you.
Yeah, look, I think it's about, realistically, it's a couple of years or more off.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I want to do and that I am actively working towards. Whether or not it happens, it doesn't faze me, because I don't hate the day job. But I think sometimes it's unhealthy that I spend a lot of my time while working on the day job just thinking about the next thing I'm going to write. So I don't want to get into a situation where that makes me resent the day job, is what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because that would be the danger of all you do is like, okay, what am I doing after this?
Yes.
I need to do these things. Well, that actually, Caleb, I'm going to steal that question for Lucas as well. I mean,
Perfect.
Lucas, the work that you're doing now, and because you do have a day job and you're in, the graphic design industry, would you want to branch out and maybe expand the comics work that you're doing with lettering, but then also maybe do some other, maybe editing, maybe doing, art as well, if that's a direction that you would like to go?
Well, actually, I'm my daytime job is managing a small print shop with a couple of partners in my city, and actually lettering is what I'm doing, not to have to do any other kind of graphic design, which I've learned to hate in almost 20 years of working for clients in my city, and having to chase payments and having to lower my prices. And in lettering, I found like customers who started being really respectful of my craft, and I started doing something I love. So basically now it's the only graphic design I want to do is lettering. I'm also starting to work half time in my print shop, basically to start lettering more. So it's
nice.
I don't know if I can ever work full-time lettering, but because I kind of have that daytime job obligation, maybe, but at least I'm trying to get a couple more hours per day because it's what I love. I just love lettering, something that really fills me, and I've enjoyed doing and in communicating with creators like David, who really put their trust in me. Well, that fascinates me.
That's awesome. That's great. Oh, well, speaking of the books and speaking of the work and the collaboration between you two, like Bill had mentioned at the top of the show, there are several books that are coming out. And the first one, I'd say probably the one that's coming out the soonest would be Monomyth from Mad Cave Studios. And David, why don't you tell us a little bit about Monomyth? Because
this is always like so. This is the first time or second time I think I'm doing the Monomyth pitch live. So
I want the pitch in 10 words or less.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. So Monomyth, basically the last kind of ailing wizard in the world casts a final spell, which summons the descendants of ancient bloodlines to a long since abandoned school for wizardry. And when they arrive, they kind of find out that instead of this sort of enchanting experience that one might expect, having consumed other media on the subject, they find something that's uniquely horrifying instead. The book was me condensing all of my feelings about She Who Must Not Be Named into a comic. And I don't think I particularly like proselytize my position that much, but I just kind of needed to get all of those feelings out and onto paper. And Mad Cave were like, let's do like a battle royale thing. And I was like, okay, but can we do it as like the Magicians meets Saw? And they seemed interested in that. And so it's weird, metatextual, gruesome, and hopefully at least a little bit intriguing.
Well, I love a magic school, especially when it's twisted and just brutally opposite from what one might expect, from that setting. And definitely much more adult sounding than, say something that's by She Who Shall Not Be Named. But that's excellent. I definitely am looking forward to this series coming out. Now, are you thinking it'll be just the one volume, or do you see sort of like a possibly a volume 2 or possibly continuation of this first series?
So if I did another one, it would be a little different. It kind of would be a spiritual successor, but instead of talking about She Who Must Not Be Named, it would be talking about new developments in technology for creatives, and that's how we would. So to be a little less magical realism and horror, and a little bit more of like sci-fi, dystopian, near future sci-fi instead. So it would be a spiritual successor to this book, and it would probably bear the same name, but it would be wildly different.
Excellent. I like that.
So number one,
Right.
you had me at the Magicians meets Saw. So that's a great like if you wanted to pitch in 10 words or less, the Magician meets Saw is that just go with that. But I'm curious and Lucas, you can weigh in on this too. So just because we kind of broached the topic and we talked about She Who Must Not Be Named and the idea of magical realism and we brought up kind of contemporary things. You know, we're a podcast done by three gay men. We know the damage that queer people who grew up loving things like Harry Potter and how it meant so much to those have seen by the author of those books doing damage to that community and just having some really, you know, bad opinions and beliefs, some transphobic beliefs. And you talk about this being a project where this is getting your feelings out about it and stuff like that. How important is it to you to kind of reclaim the idea of magic and like communal magic for any audience, but particularly for like the queer audience?
I don't think I actually approached it from that angle, but it's interesting to think about. And yeah, I now that I think about it, there are and parts of this are in the work, but there are a lot of, you know, queer pagans, including, you know, in our community specifically, directly, subculturally, and yeah, I you know, I think it's super important to really you know, at least reclaim some of that energy for us. And I think, you know, if you really look back at Harry Potter now, there are so many elements of that got wildly corrupted, and kind of that's what we're reflecting back on, is that if you take apart, you know, bits and pieces of that universe, they're kind of low-key terrifying.
Yeah.
And just the weird proto-fascistic elements of it kind of terrifying. And I knew when I kind of landed on that metatextual bent to it that I was going to need somebody who was a fantastic letterer, and Lucas, having worked with him on different iterations of Death Drop since about, I want to say 2018, he was the first person to come to mind. And so when I was asked, who do we want to letter this book, Lucas was the first person that came to mind.
Yeah. And that's, you know, having seen some of the earlier parts of Death Drop, which I love, thank you very much for letting me see sort of the development of this. You know, it's really a fantastic book to, you know, to really bring in, you know, definitely a queer audience that maybe hasn't, you know, isn't a big fan of, you know, superhero books, but wants something a little bit more exciting and, you know, semi-realistic, I guess, because there is a little bit of a more than natural element to it. But it's an exciting concept. You know, here's a former hired killer who now is, you know, this fabulous, like, just, you know, perfect drag queen who gets basically pulled back into sort of the underworld in a way, and, you know, calling on these skills, you know, that were honed after, you know, for years, doing very violent things in a way to sort of, you know, to protect the community, to save those more vulnerable members of the community, you know, from exploitation, death, and other things.
And like that pitch is so much easier to me, right? If you want the X meets Y pitch, it's Jessica Jones, but she's a drag queen. Like, that's kind of
yes,
that's kind of where I was at the beginning. And I thought I kind of added the retired assassin thing to really, I wasn't interested in doing another book that is like queer superheroes beat up homophobes. Like, it's been done to death, it's been done well, and, you know, let's move on. And so I thought the retired assassin trope, which has also been done to death, was a great way to really examine internalized homophobia.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've decided to use that to pick that apart, and set it against kind of the power of drag to subvert those like subconscious cycles of homophobia, but the ones that are internalized,
Yeah, and it's something that the drag community has been subject to, I'd say, very dangerous legislation here, very dangerous, cultural headwinds in the United States, and that's nothing new. It really isn't.
No.
This is just the latest salvo of of attacks, political, cultural, verbal, and physical, obviously, especially among the trans community. But I think it's very timely that something like this is coming out, because that's one thing that seems to be kind of lost and forgotten in a lot of the rhetoric that you hear on both sides of the debate, is that drag queens have always been on the front lines. That drag queens have always been subject to probably the most violent, whether it's verbally violent or physically violent, abuses of the queer community, because they're the most visible, and whether it's other, like you said, internalized homophobia from other members of the queer community who just don't see themselves like the very open, very gender fuckery, the exploration of the feminine, or the idea of gender, and it's also something that basically the forces against drag have always just latched upon as well. This is a clear symbol of everything that is wrong with the abnormal, the queer. And I think in a book like this, where you kind of play off of those elements, you play off of those ideas of, well, there's the conception that drag queens are not tough motherfuckers, which holy shit they are. All of them.
Yeah.
You don't duct tape your dick to your in other places if you aren't a tough motherfucker.
There's a line in there. There's a line in issue 2 there where we talk about that specifically. So.
Well, I think too, we talk about the front lines and everything, and I think now in the year 2023, we have a pretty good delineation, or at least we should have a pretty good delineation between drag queens and the trans community. But I don't know that we do sometimes. I think this current legislation that we're seeing here in the States, at least, that's attacking drag and drag culture, it really is a vehicle to punish. It's a wave of transphobia and homophobia, but it's a way to punish the trans community as well. So I just wanted to throw that in there too, because when we talk about, the Stonewall riots and those things like that, oftentimes we get to hear about drag queens, but it's still relatively unclear on whether some of those people were actually drag queens or whether they were trans. That's but I did want to mention, since we're talking about a visual medium, the visual medium of comics, and as Steve said, drag queens are so visible, and trans people, trans men and trans women and trans bodies are so visible. How did that work in from a writing perspective and from a lettering perspective or a design perspective, showing this, this very visible thing, and sometimes, and look, to me, drag is and is always going to be an element of like punk rock. Like that's the way that's the closest thing I've ever been able to formulate drag to. It's punk rock, whether or not they're dancing to Cher or Celine, it just is what it is. But like, how did you guys kind of visualize and formulate that to show it on a visual medium and to really nail what it is? I've seen some of it, and you did a fantastic job. Like this is a drag show. This is a drag party. Like, you get what this is. So what was that collaboration and communication like to actually have that come out visually?
I can't claim any credit for that. Same. That's near 99%. Alex Moore, our wonderful artist. They are just phenomenal. I found them on the internet. I saw that they had done a cover for David Boer and Claudia Balboni for Killer Queens,
Mhm.
and then had a look at their portfolio, which was fantastic. And this whole time I'm wondering, why haven't they got any sequentials to their name, and decided, you know what, if nobody else is going to do it, I'm going to do it first. And, you know, in the meantime, while we've been making this book, they've just been blowing up. You know, they've got variant covers up the wazoo at IDW. They've got, you know, offers from some really big publishers in the meantime. So I'm very thankful that I jumped onto getting them on the book early, and they did a marvelous job. They did a lot of research, which sometimes the script will say, sorry about your Google search history, but you know, sometimes they need to draw leather bears, so they're gonna have to do some research.
And bless
that's
you for that.
awful. So terrible.
Yeah, you should see the inks just came in for issue 4, and hope all of you will be pleased by the result, because I am.
We'll share those images very, very gleefully when it comes out. Oh, that's great.
I'm sure
And
Lucas has a perspective on this as well. So
yeah,
Well, Alex is just fantastic artist. They have such dynamic style. I'm a big fan of Norm Brayfogle,
Yes.
and they remind me a lot of that those Batman stories, also from the 80s, 90s maybe. So and Alex also has this like specific way of coloring, which I knew I had to follow suit then in providing sound effects that matched what they did on the page. So, well, that's basically what a letter does. We try to follow suit with the specific art style that we're working with. We don't tend to have much of our own style like old letters do. Like you can recognize John Workman, for example, or Todd Klein as those huge letters of old. But we now have to like mimetize, like mash into whatever artist we're working with. And Alex like gave me a fantastic playground to do that because they have a very specific style and very unique. So it was really a challenge, but it also came so naturally, and it's one of the books I enjoy the most literally because of that.
that's really cool. Talking about the versatility of letter with, with their artist partner. It's just, yeah. I mean, that is something that, especially nowadays, it's very recognizable. When you have a clash, it's also very recognizable when they don't work well together.
Yes, I like to say that I like my lettering not to look paste on, but what I try to do with every single element is thinking, okay, if the artist had lettered this, what would they have done? And I try to because of course I'm not that kind of an artist, but I try to mimic that as best as possible.
Yeah, you match the energy.
Exactly. Yeah. I that's the whole idea. If like Alex's art is big and it has a lot of movement, then I need to do sound effects that move. I need to do balloons that move and screens that move, and we need to have things moving at the same pace in the page because otherwise it won't read well. It won't read smoothly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and matching that energy. I can only imagine. I mean, especially with lettering, when we talk about sound effects and stuff like that, that tends to be. I would imagine, and I'm curious about this. I would imagine that would be a little bit easier because you have more room to play with, and can you do different things with fonts and lines on the lettering and stuff, as opposed to bubble letters where you have to you're a little bit more constrained. And again, I'm not a letterer, so I don't know. Do you think that that's true, or maybe is it the opposite of that?
Well, of course, sound effects are like our calling card. It's what most big or good letters are known for, because it's where we kind of shine at. But also getting to find little spots where to put maybe small detail, like a small whisper or cough, or something that really calls to the attention of the reader and lets them know how do they have to read that in the book. I also love having those chances. I mean, sound effects are really fun to do, but sometimes it's also great to find the chance to do something small and meaningful, and that know that maybe it won't be noticed, but it will be read the correct way. And that's what I love about my job, actually, to find those chances. Maybe even if they are not specifically written into the script, but as a letterer, I know I have the freedom mostly to suggest, maybe, like, I don't know, like I said, a little, if the character is coughing, instead of adding just a cough inside the balloon, you can add a little single balloon with like jagged borders and make it pop just a little bit, and well, things like that. That you need to find, like, those small bits where you can also shine beside the big booms and splash and the bangs.
Well, not only that, but you also have to work with the layout and the flow of the page. I mean, when we talk about things like in comics, you talk about the holy triangle and stuff of laying out panels and everything. Are you able to suggest certain things on how the particular images should flow to work with word balloons and to work with bubbles, or does that kind of come after the fact? Do they send you the roughs and you kind of negotiate how it should look on the page, or especially considering that you do work in both English and Spanish? Do you kind of think about how it's going to look in both languages and the extent? Sorry, I've got things happening in the background.
Don't worry. I can see them, so don't worry. Well, let's see. We usually get we use letters is usually the last step, the last how do you say it in the chain, the last link in the chain. Thanks, link. The last link in the chain. So we mostly get to where we have on the page. We are really lucky when the artists have real sense of sequentiality and tend to sketch the lettering elements even if they don't draw them, because I can usually tell that just by looking at one page, because I know I have room to work. So basically we have to work with what we have. For it's a bit different maybe for big publishers. Like, I know I've been working lately for DC Comics, or and they tend to micromanage that a little bit more. So when I get a page, I also get a placement, like sketch page, and they tell me where I have to put each of those elements. And if they found that in the sketching stage, the artist didn't leave space, they actually make them redraw the page or redraw the sketch. So it's quite different to work on those two different instances. But in the end, we have to make the page work, because sometimes, even with placements and all, sometimes I get a space like this for a balloon that has like 15 words, so I know it won't fit where the editor wants, so I need to put somewhere else, and it has to work.
And for my part, I, at least where I can, I try to do a lettering pass on the script before Lucas gets it, so that if there are places where the balloon just will not fit, I will move the dialogue around and try to rewrite the page so that it still makes sense, and that everything kind of all fits. But I actually wanted to mention another thing that Lucas's little lettering habits include one of my favorites, which is he'll stick when the sort of main character dramatically says their own name, he'll stick the logo in there in the word balloon, and it's one of my favorite little lettering habits to see there.
I love that.
You have to check Blue Beetle Graduation Day, number 5, which is in stores now, I think. It's written by Josh Trujillo, and drawn by Adrián Gutiérrez, who is Spanish. Josh, who I worked in other small projects with, told me I will be giving you more logos, name logos, he called them, to place in each issue. And this last issue was like crazy. Like, I think I counted like 8. And I was about to add more, but the editor will say, okay, I think that's enough. Maybe 8, having 8 logos in there. Yes, that's the one. Exactly. And I told Josh he has to Google if there's any other book that has more logos like that in it, because maybe we're bound to break a record.
I say try to get on a Justice League book, and every time that they're talking about introducing the next just logo.
Well, we kind of did that in that Blue Beetle number, and it was really fun to do. And I already challenged Josh to do that in maybe some other book he writes and then later. So fingers crossed.
I haven't been too active in this discussion just because, as these guys have alluded to, I'm kind of an interview bully, and I wanted these two guys to run with stuff. But Lucas, I did want to ask you about specifically Graduation Day. Though you've not been on this show, your work has been discussed in the past between Killer Queens and Graduation Day. And I just noticed that on the solicits for the trades, and I say trades plural for Graduation Day, that there's an English language version and a Spanish language version. And I was wondering if this is the first time you've done a project that was formatted in that capacity.
Well, it's actually the first time I think DC Comics does that. Like publishing same day the English and the Spanish version of a book. Actually, I think it's the first time they ever publish a book in Spanish. I'm not sure, but I think so. And I think it's such a great, bold move, because this Spanish-speaking public in target in America is ever growing, and it will continue to be so. So growing up, I always even if I spoke English and read English, I can assure you I read and write English better than I talk it. I mean, we didn't have access to the latest books because they have to be translated. And I don't know, I read Crisis like 5 years later, and the Justice League of Infinite Nemesis also like 6-7 years later, and knowing that a publisher now can publish the same day the Spanish version of a book, I think it's marvelous, and I think it's a really bold move. And I luckily had experience localizing, as we call it. We don't call it translating because I don't actually translate anything. We call it localizing. I had experience localizing some books in Argentina for from our local publisher here. The publishers they have licenses for Marvel and DC and Image and lots of manga. And I have some experience also with IDW Spanish line that they very little line they published a couple of Sonic books and graphic novel Redbone, which I did the localization in Spanish, so I can have that small experience of doing that. But of course, it's quite easier when I'm localizing my own work because that's how Blue Beetles is lettered. I letter the first version in English, and usually a week later the translation arrives, and I localize every balloon and every sound effect into the Spanish version that will also be published on the same.
And I can also sympathize with you because I'm in a situation, and I think this is more because I took Latin. Why? I don't know. But I'm in a situation where I can still read Spanish and read French. But if you asked me to speak it, it would be the bomb of all bombs. It would be terrible. But I can appreciate you there. And since I've got the baton, I also wanted to ask David a question. I know this is not necessarily a book that you're in the front seat driving right now, but it is a book that's on the stand, so I think we should mention it. Can you tell us about the conceit of Tales of Nottingham?
Well, Mad Cave came to me and said they wanted to do an anthology with their 2021 crop of talent search winners, and they wanted it to be a Nottingham anthology. And they said, we don't want to screw up your plans, so help us. And I did. So I worked with I wrote my own issue and then worked on kind of like a story direction, which was about like maximum half a page of guidance for each team. Each of them had a different, I guess, character subject as well as a different scenario. And we really just worked on fleshing out all of the backstories. And then after all of that was done, Mad Cave brought in Mags Visaggio and Victor Santos for issue 6, which will be the connective tissue between volumes 2 and 3 of Nottingham.
Nice.
And all of those talent search winners are pretty phenomenal creators and have really interpreted Shane's work in a really fun way. So I had a blast doing it. It was kind of nice to pay it forward a little bit as well, and to take all of the stuff that I've learned over the last 2 years and put it in their hands. And they're all like wonderful. They check in with me often to let me know what they're doing now that they've finished their issues, and it's really nice. And I had a blast doing it. So in terms of what we're getting, I did a prequel tale to Volume 2, which is about Aya the Assassin. That sold out and is going to a second printing this June. Issue 2 is by Anna Everts and Gabriel Serra, and it's about a specific mystery that blends in European folklore for the sheriff, and that takes place before Volume 1. Number 3 is the Maid Marian origin story by Sabs Cooper and Federico Bertoni. which I know a lot of people are excited for because our Marion is very different, and I really hope it connects with people. And issue 4 is a Friar Tuck story by Dylan Essex and Miguel Puerta. And then issue 5 is the Robin and the Merry Men origin story by Damien Becton and Raphael Romeo Magat. So a lot of things going on. They're all one-shots with different focuses, and they all look different and feel different, but they all feel like Nottingham because I was there just going, maybe not, maybe, just maybe.
Like, don't cut off Maid Marian's arm.
Daddy. Listen to Daddy. Yeah. Nice to hear. Cool.
Do not bring in aliens. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, I'll hand it back to you.
Oh well. So one thing I did have some images of the covers that are coming up, so people who are watching will be able to to keep an eye out if they haven't already placed their orders at their local comic shops. We'll see how this works with 5 of us. Oh, we are all very, very small on the left hand side. So, but here's the cover of Monomyth #1. I think there are 2 covers to this, right? There's one variant.
Yeah, there's a cover B by Wando, which is magnificent.
As most things by Wando are.
Yes.
Yeah, just.
And then
And
also
he's somebody that's in our extended circle here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then #2, I do have an image of that. For the next, I think that one will come out for June. Yeah. I believe that's a June release there.
That is a June release, yes.
Yeah. So Monomyth #1 comes out in May, comes out next month. And then also dropping in June is Death Drop Drag Assassin.
Yeah.
And this is one cover, and I believe we also have a variant as well.
Yeah, that's the incentive cover. That's Liana Kangas.
Okay.
They are phenomenal. I don't know if you're familiar with their latest series. It's called Know Your Station with Sarah Gailey at Boom.
Yep.
And that's phenomenal. They've done stuff for like TKO, Archie, IDW, just every single Star Trek series seems to have a Liana Kangas variant cover these days. So if you're a Trekkie, get on that. She said Destroy at Vault. They did the interiors for. They're amazing. That's all I have to say about Liana. They're like one of those people who so many people in comics are just like, this person is the best person. So every time I think variant cover, I think of them. So
yeah,
excellent.
I also have to say, as a huge music fan, there's a very Nagel facial structure there. It's really nice.
Also, if you're a huge music fan, I think they also just did a Z2 book or Z2 in your native tongue. I think it was a Joan Jett book. So there's that.
Yeah,
they're just everywhere, honestly. So
nice,
awesome. And I think I do have a quick image here. So I thought about it the very last second before we started. An image from an issue of Tales of Nottingham. I believe this is 4.
That's the cover for issue 1, and I assume the trade. So
okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And that's
very, very menacing. A little bit of a design change from the usual Merryman mask.
Yeah, Shane. I feel like Shane just keeps brainstorming ways of making the covers progressively creepier. I just saw the inks for issue 11's cover, and wow. And he did 2 of them, and both of them were like wildly creepier than before.
Oh well, that is awesome. I cannot wait until the main book continues, but also for both of these both of these books. once they drop. I've already got my orders in at my local store, so I shouldn't
Appreciate
miss
that.
anything, which is good.
Thank you very
Yes,
much. I appreciate
yeah.
all of the support that we can get because it is a wild time in indie comics at the moment. So get your pre-orders in, please.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm starting to get more and more frustrated when we have to go to multiple printings because people didn't pre-order, and I'm like, you got like, and they get frustrated when they miss out. I had people messaging me about not getting Tales from Nottingham #1. I'm like, pre-order, just pre-order. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
We solicit 3 months in advance.
Yeah.
So, like,
It's
Yeah,
so
and-
far in advance.
well, even though Comixology is relatively a dumpster fire, digital comics are still relatively available
Absolutely.
too. So, now that I read both, physical and digitally as well. So now that I have a nice little iPad, thanks to my better half and Christmas, so I've been reading a lot digitally, and that's actually how I read a lot of Nottingham and stuff, was digitally and stuff. So it's a great way to do it, and you don't have to try to look for it. It's just kind of right there waiting on you.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else, Bill or Caleb? Are there any other questions about the books or about?
No, I'm good. You two guys
Your
did
guest?
such a good job at leading the questions, so thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, our guests make it easy,
can't-
so that's.
I can't say the same about some previous co-hosts. So you did a very tight job, Steve and Caleb. So I'm like struggling to think about questions, and it seems there were a lot of bases covered. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're excited to. We're always excited to have you guys. To have you on, David, and also thank you so much for joining us, Lucas, because it's been wonderful
My
meeting
pleasure.
you and talking to you about this. And again, the books are Monomyth, coming out from Mad Cave Studios. First issue drops in May.
3rd of
and
May.
Death Drop, 3rd of May. Yes.
Yeah.
So oof.
Yeah.
And then also Death Drop Drag Assassin #1 from Scout Comics comes out on in
14th
June.
of
I think
June.
it's June 14th.
14th. Yeah.
Pride Month.
So, yeah, it is
Yeah.
Pride
Just
Month for
over a
us.
month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. We're gonna go see Lucas in Pride Month in Argentina.
I gotta say a big thank you to Rich Rivera, who I know is friends with you, for making the Pride Month release date happen, because I feel like he was a huge part of making that happen. So a big thank you to Rich if you're listening.
Thank you, Richard.
Well,
Yeah.
I just want to say thanks to both of you for coming on. Like, I'm a craft wonk, so I love talking like the behind the scenes crafty stuff, and just especially you, Lucas, like talking lettering and the science behind it. Like, that just made my week. So thank you. It's an artistry that I don't think gets enough conversation. So the fact that you're here talking about it means the world.
Oh, thank you. No, I was really happy to be able to share a little of what we do as letters, but we tend always to get a little sidetracked and a little forgotten. And so it's always nice to be given spot here in a comfortable place too.
Nice.
Excellent. Well, you both are welcome to stick around while we talk about other stuff, and to throw in your comments as well.
Sure, there's opportunities for you guys to chime in.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna hang out. I got nothing better to do on this. This Jewish boy has nothing better to do on this Easter Friday here in Australia.
I'm gonna say bye because it's late here and I'm really sleepy from a very sleep-deprived week I've been having. So I'm gonna send big kisses to all of you. Thanks, David, for the invite, and everyone.
Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you so much, Lucas.
Yeah.
And I
Thank you.
listen to the rest of the podcast later.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Well, hey, we've got a couple things to talk about, and so real quick, because we want to do a little bit of news before we do comics, right?
Yes, so let's head to
Yes.
the news.
had this week was it's been a banner week for new trailers, new movie trailers. We had Blue Beetle drop, and I think for those of you who listened to the Shazam 2 episode, where I kind of complained that we haven't had enough, promotion of Blue Beetle, I think I'm satisfied more than anything now. I think I'm super excited as to the feedback that the new Blue Beetle trailer got online. I think there was a lot of positive, feedback and reaction to it, which is great. Because I think for a lot of people, they weren't expecting it.
Yeah,
they weren't expecting the movie, but also expecting it to look this cool.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of wanted some. It did me personally good to see some of that positivity and hype around it, especially after some of the just kind of the lacklusterness around Shazam 2. And so to see a trailer for a DC film come out, and I'm not saying the film was lackluster. I'm just saying like the energy around it and the conversation around it was kind of lackluster. So to see like people really respond well to the Shazam or to the Blue Beetle trailer, that was great. That made me feel really good about like where they're at.
Yeah,
I gotta say, I'm kind of apprehensive. Like, the trailer does look great, but I think history has unfortunately proven that DC can cut a fantastic trailer from what is not so great a movie, and I'm really hoping that that's wrong in this case. Because after Wonder Woman 1984, I was a bit like, oof, like what a fantastic trailer to a movie that was not very good.
Oh,
that's always sad. That's always sad. Like my heartbreaker was Prometheus. The Prometheus trailer makes it look like the best film that has ever been shown in any cinema in any part of the world, and then you get that. Yeah.
And then we get Prometheus. I mean, they've been trying to reboot.
The trailer's amazing.
Aliens. The trailer's fit. They should just show that like 15 times to make it like
do over.
For anyone who wants the more positive review of what Wonder Woman 84 was, come see me. I have like a whole thesis written out about it.
No, I also did enjoy the movie, but I do understand the flaws and it is.
It's a shame to throw so many fantastic elements in there and have it not coalesce into. And I suppose it's probably because it was a movie that felt like it was written by committee, and
it was, From my element, as somebody who is, very interested in things,
it's kind of funny because like most of the reports were that was one of the films where the director had some of the biggest degree of autonomy out of the DC films. It's tough,
But it felt that way. It felt like there were like three or four voices.
Feel a little bit. The beginning definitely felt that way.
And it felt like there were artifacts from older versions of like the edit that kind of was still in there. Yeah. It was very strange. But like Pedro Pascal's like used car salesman version of Maxwell Lord was like a brilliant move. And the rest of it was
Look, as a treatise on trickle-down economics, the evils of Reaganism, and the prosperity doctrine, I will vouch for that movie every day.
Yes. But yeah, so I, for one, super, super excited for Blue Beetle. I was already excited for Blue Beetle, but this makes me feel a lot better about what DC
do think, given the conversation we had last time, Steve, I think this was the right move to make this appear like it's coming out of nowhere. In some circles, I do think if this had come out 4 months earlier, any excitement would have been dissipated, especially in light of the reaction to Shazam.
Yeah, and also in light of the fact that, when we first heard about Flash, when we first started getting images of Flash, so much stuff happened between then and now. That I think there was enough room for a lot of negative press to kind of get in there. But
it also wasn't the only trailer. So what else do we get?
It's true. The day after, we got the new Spider-Verse trailer. Now, this is actually, I think, like the third trailer or maybe like the second full trailer. And
there was a teaser and then
there was a teaser to the first trailer and a teaser to the second trailer, and now we get the second trailer. But the second trailer, I think, gives us probably the biggest picture of what this movie is about. Actually, this is the third trailer. a biggest picture of what the movie's about. And I think that we get a lot more of Miguel O'Hara. We get a lot more of some of the other spider people inhabiting this the Spider-Verse. A lot of really great action moments, and of course a really awesome gag towards the end of it, which I'm glad they threw in because it left me with a huge guffaw before the titles appeared. But Into the Spider-Verse, and again, this is going to be part 1 of 2. I believe the second one they are gunning for a 2024 release, summer 2024. Hopefully this is great and leaves us on the edge of our seat waiting for next year, hopefully around the same time. And of course we did, honorable mention, we did get yet another and the final trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which, after the last trailer reveal, I don't think my emotions could take it really anymore. To see any more of this, I'm just going to save all of that emotional energy for next month when the movie comes out.
So on
there a TV trailer as well?
Yeah. That was. I think it was the final trailer. Was the TV one, but there was also another recent one.
No, wasn't there a TV, a project for? Wasn't there a trailer for a TV?
Still being very subtle here.
Yeah.
It was a secret, an invasive secret.
I'm sorry, I don't recall anything about that. Did it involve an eye patch? It was an eye patch. Somebody.
Have you been replaced by a Skrull?
Maybe, and that is the subject of the new Marvel series that has been teased. We knew was coming. There was obviously some scheduling concerns after earlier this year when Disney announced that they were going to be scaling back the number of projects that are going to be on TV and in the film and in the theaters. We weren't sure when Secret Invasion was going to be coming out, but the new trailer dropped this past week and also revealed that the release date is in June. I believe June 18th is June 18th is the day it comes out. Which is what is that? Just a few days after Death Drop. I guess that's number 1. So make it appointment viewing after you read your issue of Death Drop. Plan on watching. Skrulls.
Steve replaced by a Skrull is just Steve, but green.
Just me, green, with a wrinkly face, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, it looks super cool. Very much in the vein of Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
And hopefully a little bit more exciting than some of the Falcon and Winter Soldier was, because there was some kind of slow moments in that show for six issue series. But this looks like nonstop espionage, sci-fi action. So I'm super excited for it.
Okay.
So, but
I really want to have the line, "I'm sick of these motherfucking scrolls on this motherfucking planet." I really need it to happen.
You never know. It might be. I know this is being touted as an extremely serious entry. But there's room. There's always room for a
after the Beatles get back, they have relaxed the language a bit on that platform. So
I am very excited for more Olivia Colman in spy stuff. I think that's, if anybody has seen The Night Manager, it's like
she's so sweetly menacing. Like she's always just like the way she delivers lines. She could just say the exact same line, but depending on the movie, it either sounds horrifically sinister or just the most wonderful thing you've ever heard. Yeah, I love her.
All right. Well, I guess it's time that we move on to books. Now, Steve, I don't even know what your book is.
He was very secretive about this.
You were very secretive.
Yeah, very secret. Well, and the reason why
I know that
I was back and forth.
that Caleb has a major publisher.
I do.
I have a major publisher.
He does.
Do you have a major publisher, Steve?
I do.
All right. Well, what the hell? You can go first, and Caleb go, and then I'll go.
And everything about David is major, so
yeah.
Major. He's major.
He's
a major menace to society. That's what.
With Rebecca.
So what I did, what my book will be that I'll talk about is Unstoppable
Oh,
Doom
yeah.
Patrol #1. This is probably, and Bill, stop me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first mainstream DC like DC Universe Doom Patrol title in quite some time. The last time,
was it the Burn reboot? Has it been that long?
Maybe it's been
they've
been a while.
They've made mainstream appearances, but I don't think they've had their own title. Yeah, it may be going back to the Burn.
It could be, because I think the last series that they had that was being published was
I'm just trying to think of
the Young Animal
Burn.
imprint.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call that. Yeah,
and that definitely wasn't mainstream.
I haven't read it yet, so I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about it. Of course.
So, so this is leading directly out of their appearance in Lazarus Planet, the big sort of crossover that a lot of stuff happened. I didn't read all of it yet, so yeah. But very similar to a situation that happened in the Marvel Universe several years back. An event has occurred on the planet that has activated or brought forth a lot more metahumans. And Doom Patrol, in response to this, is basically going out to stop the exploitation, to protect, to save, to stop disasters that are being caused by metahumans or by the exploitation or an abuse of metas. And this is the current team. This is the main cover lineup. You'll see there's Robot Man, Cliff Steele. You've got Elastigirl, Rita Farr, and of course, there's the Negative Spirit from Larry Trainer, Negative Man. There are some new faces in there, but there's also a very old face, and I don't know if you'd recognize this person, but the character over there in a suit and with their face covered is Jane. And Jane's newest persona, and probably, arguably the most together, is the Chief. So Jane here is the new leader of the team, and this character is the Chief, this alter. And there are a few new characters in here. One in the bottom left there, if you're watching the show, is Beast Girl, who has the ability to manipulate sort of fight or flight responses in humans and animals. Can basically calm people down, freak them out, just basically manipulate their emotions. And then also the character who makes their appearance as the metahuman that they fight / rescue in this issue, and that is Subject 99, who's the buff scaly dude in the A shirt right there. And so basically in this issue, they arrive in Gotham City and basically cause a massive traffic jam just by showing up, which is just peak Doom Patrol style, just making a mess of things as soon as they show up, because they're there to head off a disaster being caused by a meta. And they, of course, very quickly get into it and end up fighting not just the creatures that have been created by the meta, but also the genetic corporation that's been exploiting him. That character, it's MetaGen is the name of the company. We might see them more and more as they pop up, but they're essentially a company that has been taking a lot of these new metas and for a couple of bucks turning them all into test subjects, which Doom Patrol is here to stop. Of course, they're in Gotham. What will definitely happen is Batman will show up. And I think in this particular situation, is Batman is helping out the Doom Patrol fighting the MetaGen security team, as well as these strange creatures that have been created from Subject 99's body. They're both fighting, both the Chief and Batman fighting the enemies, but they also have the time to have a conversation about what this Doom Patrol is all about. And Batman wants to stop what's happening, but also get Subject 99, put him in Arkham, put him behind bars. And the Chief is basically like, no, you don't do this. The only reason why Subject 99 is doing this, the only reason why this is happening is because he's being exploited. He's being abused. He's being tortured. And honestly, Batman, you don't get it because you're not part of our community. you're not a meta. You don't know what it's like to be one of us, being constantly, reviled and exploited and abused and, treated as garbage for our powers or for things that are beyond our control. And basically puts him in his place. I think Robin at one point is like, like that, she's got a point. And really, I think this is a really great introductory issue for this new team or this new, iteration of the team, because it really clearly lays out what this book is about and who these characters are.
I just checked that last page, Steve. I'm shocked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Bill's down here having a conniption.
I'm absolutely shocked.
Yeah. Yes, there's a sub story that's going on here. That's in the background here with two major Doom Patrol villains, Monsieur Malat and the Brain. The Brain has been placed now in a giant robotic gorilla body, so
I was not expecting
the Brain
that.
and Monsieur Malat can kind of physically
get
it on a little bit
at
more.
All. I did some recon. I did some recon, and it looks like the Keith Giffen written Doom Patrol was after the Byrne reboot.
Okay,
you had they were all like in very quick succession of each other. You had the John Arcudi, and then the John Byrne, and then the Keith Giffen. They were all within like an 8-year period. Yeah. So you actually had a lot of mainstream Doom Patrol for a time there. And then I did really like their appearance in Batman Superman, though it was a flashback. But it sounds like there's connective tissue. In terms of this version, it's the same. So
and I think this version, to be honest, when it comes to DC and the Doom Patrol, pretty much everything is canon. When it comes to what they've experienced and who they are, whether or not it's understood and in canon with the rest of the universe.
It's such a metatextual. It's such a metatextual thing that it's easy to do that. Like everything can. I mean, you have Danny the Talking Street. Like everything can be canon. So I mean,
everything is.
Yeah, which is cool. I mean, I think comics does that better than any other medium.
Well, and especially with a team like Doom Patrol, you can play with that idea. Yeah. I mean, basically the entire run of Young Animal was that everything is metatextual. I mean, even with Morrison's and Morrison's Doom Patrol, it was just one big meta narrative that was happening where they were all self-aware.
We probably also should mention that after Morrison, Doom Patrol was written by a trans writer, Rachel Pollack, and she recently passed away. And
I don't think she passed away, actually.
Or she's in final stages of life. Yeah. That's right. Hospice.
Oh, I thought she had already. I
had thought she had passed away, but I think David is correct that she is at end of life stage.
Well, if you are interested in reading her take on Doom Patrol, I believe they just released a few months ago the omnibus from her run on the series. So definitely check that out because it's a very interesting take, especially following Morrison. And I love Rachel Pollack's writing. Her prose is definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. And she's very tight. She's very tight with our friend Justin Smith. So I believe Justin was a student of hers.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well,
not changing subject, but to taking it a little bit of a different direction. Steve, who did you say the artist was on that?
So I didn't, but it was Chris Burnham. I mean, if you can't tell from some of the pages, but Chris Burnham on art duties, and Dennis Culver is the writer.
I wouldn't. So I know Chris's work, and that makes sense now that I know that. I didn't peg that at first. This is the most. So I was looking at that. It's almost got like a Carlos Ezquerra vibe. This is the most Carlos Ezquerra that I've seen Chris Burnham ever do. Yeah. That was interesting.
I wouldn't have automatically said this was Chris Burnham.
Yeah, like there's more of like a texture. There's more of a texture to this work, almost like in certain places there's like a Frank Quitely texture.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
There is, but Frank Quitely and Chris Burnham, I kind of do see a lot of connected.
They're in the same
with
school.
their styles.
Yeah.
And these, I think the images that I picked for this, if you go through the book, there are several different, especially if you look in the faces, very Chris Burnham, which is great. We've also got Brian Reber on colors and Pat Brosseau on letters. So I think this team is really it's given me a really great feeling for this book, and looks like it's going to be a good ride going forward. I like this team. I like the premise of this book, and I think it's going to be one to watch. So again, Doom Patrol is a very unique flavor that a lot of readers aren't necessarily all about. But if you're a fan of the TV series, this has a lot of the same kind of quirky humor, weird, meta type of feel to it. But again, they do get to play in the regular DC Universe sandbox now, which is
sometimes I think some of their strongest stories, particularly Morrison's.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
I just love that moment where Paris is swallowed by a painting, and Justice League is like, "Well, fuck that, we're not doing that." Send the Doom Patrol.
The weirder the better. Doom Patrol.
We'll screw this up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love those. I love those moments of interaction, and I think there's a particular pocket that only they can operate within. So this should have been top of my stack. I'm so far behind, but I will get to
I'm so disappointed in you, Bill, that it wasn't.
I have not read anything practically. I've not read anything. And the DCBS box came on Saturday.
Made a thud on the porch.
I read one thing, which I'll talk about. All right, over to Caleb. Caleb, what are you reading that you're enjoying?
Well, first, Bill, let me. This is going to be the most redundant question ever, though. But you said you had a big publisher book. Are you doing a DC book?
No, I'm doing an image book.
An image book. Oh, okay. Well, see, I was going to make a whole joke about how I get to be the middle in the Bill and Steve sandwich, but now I can't. But that's fine.
Sexiest filling of an Oreo.
You could just imagine it anyway.
I mean, I know I am right now.
So I'm going to take us over to the House of Ideas. And y'all, there are shenanigans afoot in Wakanda, if you can imagine such a thing. So I want to talk about the Black Panther series that's been going on that actually just wrapped up last week with issue 15. But I want to recap just because it makes it flow 13, 14, and 15. This series is written by John Ridley. It is drawn by Herman Peralta. Sebastian Ching does the colors. Joe Sabino does the letters. Alex Ross did some amazing covers for this series, as Steve is going to show you as we roll through here.
Were they part of the Timeless series, like with the white backdrop?
No, I don't think
they're different. Okay,
I think they're different.
That's happening right now too.
And I want to give a shout out to Joe Bowen, who did the logo for all of these series. Like the logo on this thing was fantastic, just from a design perspective. So I will say I'm going to get into the meat of the story a little bit, but I will say that one of the things, like, I enjoyed it, and for reasons that are going to be apparent when I talk about it. But I will say that there was a little bit of it followed the Black Panther films a little bit. It felt like there was a little bit of, okay, we're going to borrow from this hit phenomenon, and basically here's what's going on. So Black Panther T'Challa, while he was king of Wakanda, he put sleeper agents all over the world. Now, they don't call them war dogs, but if you've seen Black Panther, you know that T'Chaka in the films did the same thing. He put sleeper agents all over the world, and these were very skilled, very trained, very steeped in espionage kind of figures that in the films caused problems. And we see a little bit of it's a little bit derivative, but it ended up being a very fun series that actually is going to, at least it should, make very big waves in the socio-political machinations of Marvel. And here's why. So unfortunately, one of the sleeper agents that T'Challa had was his childhood best friend, whose name was Jai. And Jai was put into place to do, as a sleeper agent, to do some nefarious stuff if need be. But Jai was killed. Long story short, Jai faked his own death to kick off a series of events that would allow, if things went the way that Jai had planned, Wakanda to take over the world and implement the kind of governance that works well in Wakanda, right? Like, so his idea was world peace through domination, to a sense. How many times have we've seen that story? It's kind of a pinky in the brain moment, but it's not going to work out, right? So, but it's kind of understandable, right? Like, we see Wakanda and its global impact and how good it can be. He thinks he can apply that to the rest of the world. But the only way that you do that is through defeating everybody else. And they can't let this happen. So, because T'Challa put this into place, it causes a lot of problems, as you might expect. And he eventually has to start going through the process of confronting his childhood best friend and also these sleeper agents who still feel like they are working for the good of Wakanda. And it finds T'Challa being an outsider. He is not only in trouble with Wakanda for doing things that he wasn't supposed to do. He is at odds with his best friends and these Wakandan soldiers who are a small sect on the outside, but he's also at odds with the Avengers. And there are a lot of characters in these last 3 issues that come to play where T'Challa finds himself like getting rocked back. He's got very few friends left. He's made mistakes and burnt bridges and eroded trust with everyone that he needs to have trust with. Because what's going to happen is Jai has developed an algorithm, called a bug. He is going to hack into the world's global nuclear codes and wipe some governments off the map to be able to instill Wakandan style governance. And that's bad for all parties involved. Nobody wants nuclear waste to happen. So T'Challa, through some connections with a couple of different groups, but Shuri is leading a group. He gets in contact with some mutants like Gentle, if you guys remember him from the X-Men, who is a kind of tattooed-esque mutant. He is leading a charge.
I love Gentle from that X-Men Red Tom Taylor run.
Yes, Tom Taylor did amazing on that run. He plays a prominent role in this series. There's another character called the Buffalo Soldier, who is very much a turn of the century Civil War-esque black soldier who was a frontiersman who rides buffalo. There's these characters that speak a weird foreign language that are otherworldly, that we don't really know what they're doing. They're just causing chaos. And there's a lot happening here. Long story short, in these last 3 issues, what you see is that in order to ensure that Jai and his forces, they're not called war dogs, but to connect it with the film, they are war dogs, to ensure that their plans don't come to fruition. Wakanda ousts Black Panther. They oust T'Challa. He is not their king. They instill a type of democratic republic governance, and they make a bond with an enemy nation. They make friends out of old enemies. And who else but the Sea King himself, Namor, allies the Atlanteans with Wakanda, also bringing in the Avengers to stop. They're going to war. They're going to stop these battles. And here's how they did it. Not only is part of the peace treaty is T'Challa ousted from being the king and the ruler of Wakanda, he is physically ousted. He is no longer allowed. He's no longer a citizen. He's no longer allowed to step foot in Wakanda. He is now exiled from his homeland and the homeland of his ancestors. You can call it a deal with the devil, but this is going to make very big waves. If you guys remember Hickman's Avengers run, that's where Wakanda and Atlantis really got into. That's where their beef. I think it was Hickman's Avengers run. That's basically Namor massacred Wakandans.
Yeah, I think you have to go back to AVX.
That also, yeah,
Yeah.
it's history being a thing. So, but at least in there was a massacre here. So this is very much making a
That's
deal.
when Namor had the Phoenix power.
Yep.
That's when that went down.
And that was AVX. That was not a Hickman's run. Lots of
But
strife.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
there's a lot of follow up in the Hickman run.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they do that, and so it's very big doings. Long story short, they are able to kick in and save the day. One of the new characters in this book is actually Jai's would-be partner, his girlfriend, fiance, Omalala, Omalola, who is an assassin. At the end of the 15th book in here, T'Challa has got Jai cornered, and he can't kill him, which is what everybody's in agreement needs to happen. He's not going to stop, but Omalola does. Spoilers, sorry, but she is able to step up and do the dirty thing. And so where we end at in this last issue is with actually Namor being elevated in a higher regard in Wakanda than T'Challa is. T'Challa is exiled. One of the generals is now considered like probably a prime minister. Wakanda shifted to a democratic republic, and we're going to have to see where it goes from there. I thought it was a great ending. Like I said, if you've seen, and who hasn't, but if you've seen Black Panther, the film, there are some derivative elements to this. But it was still really well done. And to kind of bring the machinations of Namor and of Atlantis to a head in this was great. And in these 3 issues, there's too much to get into to really detail, but the side characters that show up in this are fantastic. The Buffalo Soldier is a great character. Carol Danvers has some really great moments in this book. Captain America plays a prominent role. At one point, at the very end of it, Namor is just spouting off the mouth, and Captain America steps up, says, "Namor, considering we have to work together with the Avengers, I invite you to shut the hell up." just squash it. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought it was fun. The covers are amazing. The interior artwork. I mean, Herman Peralta is a stunning artist. It was beautiful. So I am sad to see this book end, but I really like where it went. So I would encourage everyone. I haven't spoken about this series at all since it came out. I actually picked it up at the tail end because it had Namor in it. And I was like, hey, let me see what's happening with my boy. And I'm really glad I did, because it places Black Panther in a very strange spot going forward. He's no longer the chairman of the Avengers, but it also leads into the next Black Panther series, which is going to be written by Eve L. Ewing, and Chris Allen is doing the artwork on that. It comes out in June, so plenty of time to pre-order it. Check it out. We'll see where it goes. He's an outsider, which might make him the most dangerous hero ever. So he's now looking for a place to fit. He doesn't have a home anymore, which somebody who's as closely connected to his nation and his land as Namor is, that's going to be an interesting twist. So I'm curious to see it.
Interesting. Just so you didn't think I was crazy, these are the timeless covers I was talking about, which are happening right now. So
Alex Ross has just been really busy, is what you're saying.
With Marvel, yeah.
Yeah, he's doing a ton. He's done a ton of Avengers covers. He's been doing a lot.
Yeah.
I actually had a very interesting conversation about Alex Ross at my local comic shop today. And we were talking about his different covers and stuff. All of them are good, but you can really tell when it's a subject matter that he cares about and a subject matter that he doesn't. Yeah.
Oh my God. Just when you thought he got stale, then he got the Battle of the Planets covers.
Yeah.
Which were replicated on the Gotchaman, and it's like he's never gotten to do one property he really wanted to, which is Masters of the Universe. He's never
surprised.
Why not?
Yeah.
What are they waiting on?
Happen. Yeah. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to talk about a book. It's an Image book, but it could be any publisher, let's face it. This is a book that came out in 2020. And between the pandemic and the shaky kind of release schedule, and for some reason in the solicits, I want to say like the January or the December solicits, it's almost like Image was resoliciting this almost like a new book. So this is when I finally picked it up. And Caleb, I believe you've read this.
I have.
This is Paul is Dead When the Beatles Lost McCartney. The writer, or has he's billed in the book lyrics, is Paolo Baron, and the music, we should say the art, is by Ernesto Carbonetti. And one thing I have to say about the Beatles, they're a group that is surprisingly well represented in graphic novels and comic books over time. One absolutely great resource when I was a kid getting into this stuff is there's a Marvel super special, The Beatles Story, which is written by David Anthony Kraft. His issues of Defenders have these references to Rush and Blue Oyster Cult sprinkled all through them. But the artist was George Perez. And if you ever have the opportunity to find the magazine copy, it's definitely worth it. Because of legalities, it likely will never be reprinted because it wasn't an official Apple release, but it's definitely worth your while. One of our favorite past guests was Vivek Tiwari when he was on to discuss his book about Brian Epstein and the Fifth Beatle with Andrew Robinson. I discussed a book about their Hamburg days called Babies in Black a while ago, which centered on Stuart Sutcliffe, their bass player who passed away in his romance with a German girl, Astrid Kutcher. Even like the really exploitative stuff, like the books that came out on Revolutionary Rock and Roll Comics, a miniseries called The Beatles Experience. The art's really rudimentary, but at least they get their facts right, which is nice to see, especially over an 8-issue series. So they are a group that's been pretty well represented in comics. So Paul is Dead is speculative fiction about this conspiracy that popped up around 69 or 70 that Paul McCartney was actually dead. And since late 1966, there's been an imitator in the band. And he, in taking the lyrics of A Day in the Life literally, he blew his mind out in a car. And this runs with that. For some reason, especially in the early 70s, this just got momentum. There were radio specials dedicated to this. Almost every release from 66 on, you were looking for clues. And, Abbey Road has some excellent clues.
Yeah.
So you see here, they're in the walkway over to Abbey Road. And if you go by their dress, John is the preacher, Ringo's the pallbearer, Paul is the decedent. Paul also is not wearing shoes, and it was not uncommon for people in England to be buried without their shoes at the time. And George is the gravedigger. There's also a car here that says 28 if, which meant if he was still alive, he'd be 28. It was a time when conspiracy theories were fun. Let's put it that way. This book runs with it, and it details the reaction to Paul's death in 1966 by the other Beatles, Brian Epstein, their producer George Martin, and also their engineer Jeff Emmerich, who is kind of an unsung hero because really the post-Rubber Soul sound of the Beatles is almost as much due to him as George Martin. And it was nice to see that. It was an interesting book in that I thought the dialogue was really tight, though the script itself was kind of light. The art, though, was astonishing. And Steve, if you can just show a graphic. Unfortunately, a lot of the graphics that were online throw out a lot of spoilers to the story. But this is early on in the goings on where John Lennon is reacting to the news. And you see the counterbalance with Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager, talking him through that. So beautiful colors. I mean, the art is totally worth it for the art. There's some inconsistencies in how the Beatles themselves are depicted, but you get away with that and you can make allowances for it because it kind of feels like a drug trip, and their use of drugs in out of the studio, not in the studio. And that was an interesting dialogue that's in the book. It certainly feeds into some kind of acid trip. So there's a surprise at the end. I was not expecting where it went.
Yep.
But it also makes perfect sense given the particular part in the global zeitgeist that the Beatles occupied in 66 and 67. I don't think it's a very effective book if you're not familiar with the band, but I think if you do gain some familiarity, it's a nice addition to your comic library. So,
Bill, to that point, I was not familiar with the Paul is Dead conspiracy before I read this. So I went in kind of blind and didn't know a lot of the references. And so I had to go and kind of look up and do some research and kind of go down that rabbit hole of the Paul is Dead.
Which is fun.
It's number one.
That
is very fun. It's going to lead you to some weird play. I recommend taking a gummy while you do it. It will take you to some fun places. That's just me. But I will say, like, after I did that, though, I was much more enriched. I felt like I was closer to the band and to the music, especially of Abbey Road. I felt like I understood it better, even though we're talking about a conspiracy, but it did contextualize a lot of the things. But that said, the art, as you mentioned, the art alone, it was, I mean, it's gorgeous. It is such it's, I want to use psychedelic, but it's not necessary. It's like a psychedelic watercolor, but that doesn't do it justice.
Yeah. It doesn't use the same touch points as 60s psychedelic art.
Right.
Which is refreshing in a way.
But tonally, it shares that with it, but it's a different visual experience.
Yes, it shares the DNA, but it's DNA that's used 50 years later.
And then, Bill, have you read Jim Lives?
No, a friend of mine gave me an electronic copy. Let's put it that way.
I'll see if I can't find my copy and send it to you. Same creative team, same author, same artist.
Yeah,
wrote a book about Jim Morrison. It's, again, conspiracy theories. Jim Morrison didn't really die; he lived, and this is what he's doing. Phenomenal book, steeped in the nature of this era of the weirdness that went on with psychedelic rock and roll, be it the Beatles or be it the Doors. And the mysticism that all of those people dabbled into and that the fandom dabbled into because of it, which was a great experience. So they're doing a great, like, it's like a rock doc, but like you said, it's speculative fiction.
Right. And did Jim Live come out before or after this?
It came out. Keep going. I will tell you momentarily.
Okay, great. Yeah, but it was really interesting that in the solicits, it almost felt like a new release with how they were spotlighting it. I don't know what the rationale was behind it. Again, the pandemic did some weird shit. Steve can attest with that you can still get Scooby toys from McDonald's. Scoob. So it's possible that, like, a huge pallet from China came over or something. I don't know with these books, but I was glad they did because it's not expensive. $16.99 bucks. It's not expensive. Again, as a band that I said is really surprisingly well represented in comics, and even there's a Batman issue in 1970 that addresses the Paul is Dead that is freaky. I just think it's a very welcome addition, and I'm glad I got it.
So it looks like Paul is Dead came out in or at least it was translated in 2020 to English from Italian.
Yeah.
I think Jim Lives was translated in 2021. So
okay.
Now, as far as when they came out, these are localized. Yeah. I'm going to start using
local. These
are localized at a different time. So I don't actually know which one came out, but in looking at it, Paul is Dead was localized first.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we should start wrapping this show up. And before we get to our final segment, we do have a segment where we kind of show off things we got. We call it Geek Gets. Now, Steve, you're usually the one that doesn't have a Geek Get, but do you have Geek Gets this time around?
No.
Well.
No Geek Gets for me.
I see.
Even though you received a package from New Jersey?
Oh, yes. Oh, crap. That is not very close to me.
Bill with the leading questions right today.
I know.
It is in another room.
Permission to leave the
yes, I did receive
on leash if possible. Okay.
I did receive a wonderful, wonderful, care package from a certain host on this show, containing 3 books that I so overjoyed to get. And one of them I've actually been thinking about and putting off getting for myself for way too long, and that is because I'm a huge fan of this other podcast, shame, called My Favorite Murder. And there was like, I opened up the box and I giggled and was just super happy to get the the My Favorite Murder book from Karen and Georgia. And then also the Faith novelization, which I was surprised about that. I did not know that had come out.
No, I didn't know that.
I was not aware
and
of
just
that.
to let people know, the name of the book is a very famous quote from the podcast, which is "Stay sexing,
don't get murdered."
Yep.
But yeah, I'm super excited. Thank you again, Bill, for the gifts, and I wish I had brought them up with me so I could show them off.
Fail.
I know, sad.
David, do you have anything that you've recently received?
I mean, it's not like entirely geeky, but I got this new shirt, which has like an alien abducting someone. It says "Get in, loser." And I also have another matching one in white, which has a bunch of aliens in a little UFO, and it says "You can't trip with us." So.
Nice.
Over to Caleb. Caleb, do you have any geekettes?
Yeah, I sure do. I'll show off one thing. And it is music related. I think I've said in the past, like Bill, I love music. I don't love a particular genre. I love all of it. One of who I would put in my top 10 guitarists of all times is a guitarist named Eddie Hazan. He played for a band called Parliament Funkadelic. He played for a lot of stuff, but Parliament Funkadelic is probably his favorite one. Last week, my nieces, who are 13 and 14, came and hung out with us for a week for their spring break. And one of the places they wanted to go was to the record store, and they wanted to go pick up some new vinyls, which they also wanted to go by the comic shop, which we did. So my heart was filled on that day. But while I was flipping through records, I found a pressing of Maggot Brain, Funkadelic, which has a copy of the lead-in track is Maggot Brain. It's the title track, which in my opinion, whether you should listen to it or not, it's up to you, but it's not so humble. Maggot Brain is one of the best guitar solos of all time. I'll put it up there with anything. I will fight men in the street for its honor. When they were recording it, George Clinton looked at Eddie Hazan, whose mother was sick at the time, if the legend proves right, and said, "I want you to play like your mom is dead." And he did. It's very hard to listen to that song without feeling some kind of way. I love Eddie Hazan. I love his work on this, and this to me is an all-timer album. So I finally got my hands on a copy of it, so I just have to listen to it repeatedly on YouTube anymore. So go check it out if you can get your hands on it. If you are not familiar with Parliament Funkadelic, listen to all their stuff, but listen to this album specifically. Give Maggot Brain a listen. You will be better for it.
Nice. I mean, that's such an amazing story that, there were, I believe, Steve, you watched the show as well. I believe there were 2 episodes of Mike Judge's Tales from the Tour Bus dedicated to George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic. Yes. And absolutely. I guess that's just testimony of how many crazy stories are associated with this man and this band that didn't make the cut.
Right.
But that's an amazing story.
Like half the band members didn't get paid after tours, not because he was hoarding the money, because he was a legitimately good accountant and drug dealer. And so he would take, as he brought them drugs, he would keep a ledger, and he knew what they owed him. Yeah. So when they didn't get paid at the end, he said, no, you got paid. You just did all of your pay.
You consumed all of it.
For better or worse, he is not a man without his faults. He's not a perfect man by any means, not even necessarily a good man, but he is a very interesting figure that I'm kind of fascinated by. But again, for me, the draw of this in particular is Eddie Hazel's guitars and Bootsy. He didn't play on all the tracks, but Bootsy Collins is again one of the best bassists of all times. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's the draw for this. It's a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm. Okay, nice. My geek get is animation.
I thought those were Girl Scout cookies for a second.
No, not here, baby. I've been very good with.
They're moose and squirrel flavored.
God, I'm hungry.
But I got the complete series of the 1959 to 1964 animated series, The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends. 59 hours over 5 seasons. So it's a lot. But if you've never seen the series, I mean, it's one of the most literate, one of the most engaging animated series of all time, and it holds up. And if you're in the States, it's currently on sale through Amazon at 52% off, which is a nice discount. It seems there's a lot of stuff that ended up under the DreamWorks umbrella that is on sale. Voltron is another one right now. Got that too. If you want to check out those Amazon prices on some of the DreamWorks animation and I guess classic media catalog that's there right now. You know, there've been many Rocky and Bullwinkle projects in the past, but there's nothing like the original J Ward series. And so happy I'm gonna get to explore that in a nice remastered sense at some point. All right, we're going to wrap this one up for real now, and we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears up. We do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week. In the bear community, if you find a fella attractive, you woof at him. And we do something similar here. We woof at something that may be a comic book, maybe a film, maybe a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
My woof of the week is the new Dungeons and Dragons movie, because it's really good. It was, it's definitely one of the things I was looking forward to, just because it's neat, it's nerdy, it's geeky. I have to see everything that's nerdy and geeky like that. I'm not a huge D&D player. I have, played several games, been on several campaigns over the past 20 some odd years, but usually only for a few runs, and then I'm out or I move or something happens and I don't get to enjoy it. But this movie was great. It literally was like watching a filmed version of somebody's campaign. They did a really good job at moving the story at that type of pace and having some fun little things. And if you were a fan of the 1980s cartoon, yes, the entire party makes an appearance, and it's one of those like, wait, I recognize that stupid hat. Like, they all show up. It's really funny. So I recommend watching it. It's great. It just came out just about a week ago here as we're streaming this. So it should probably be out in the theaters for a little bit of time. But yeah, the new Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
Nice. Over to our guest, David. David, what is your woof of the week?
So I have two. Sorry. The first one is the latest episode of The Mandalorian, and for those of you who who are here know why. And we'll leave it at that for Bill's sake. And when Bill sees it, he'll understand why. And yeah, we're done. We're done, Bill.
Okay,
You can...
cool.
I
know there's guests. That's all.
Yes,
I know there's guests, but I want to be surprised, and
directed by Bryce Dallas Howard,
who did some of her previous 2 episodes.
Some of the best episodes
in that series. So,
and there's people complaining about this episode. And to those people, I say, shut up.
Yeah.
Shut up.
It was fantastic. It
was pure joy.
Yeah. No complaints from me on all fronts. And my second wolf is a book that is coming out in a week and a half or so, which is called Under Kingdom. It's a YA graphic novel from Dark Horse by my friend Christoph Forgach and artist Marie Enger. It's fantastic and queer and refreshingly a story for young boys, which doesn't involve a protagonist who loves punching. So yeah, check that out.
Nice. Over to Caleb. Caleb, what is your wolf of the week?
So my wolf of the week goes out not to any single person or thing in particular, but so as most of you know, I live in Arkansas, and for people who don't live in the United States, it's kind of in the central area of the U.S., the central southern area. The state was rocked by a tornado this week, specifically the city I live in, Little Rock, which doesn't often face this kind of thing. Significant damage. It ripped through several apartment complexes, and so it looks like a war zone in much of my city. So my wolf of the week goes out to the first responders, to the police, to the firefighters, to the volunteers, to everyone who jumped in to make life a little less shitty for the victims of this thing. That like both the week at Friday when it happened and then this week and ongoing, because it caught a lot of people off guard. But as terrible as it was, I can say from firsthand experience that the community got together and said, you know what? No, we're not letting this stand. We are doing something, and we're doing a lot of things. So the community showed up and showed out to make sure that people not only had a place to stay that night, but they had clothes, they had food, they had shelter. And it I don't know about you guys, but I've been in a place here lately where just watching the news and everything else, I've been in a very people equal shit mode and have lost a lot of faith in humanity. And then seeing my community come together to do what they did this week and what they're continuing to do, it did me good. And so my wolf of the week goes out to the city of Little Rock, the community of Arkansas. It's not even just Little Rock. Several other cities got hit too, and people are just coming out of everywhere to make life a little bit easier. So I guess my wolf of the week goes out to Arkansans. I don't know, to people who help in times of need. That's who my wolf goes out to.
All right.
Thank you.
I also have to ask you, given your work with the van, is this the first time that you've had like this level of influx of people who are suddenly unhomed?
Yeah, in the past, here in Little Rock, because most of our work is here in Central Arkansas. So here in Little Rock, yes, this was the quickest. So Friday night, we opened up an emergency shelter and a staging ground for donations and stuff like that. We cycled through over 80 people Friday night. Saturday morning, we cycled through over 200 people and put them in hotel rooms with the city of Little Rock. So it's a lot, but it gave the Red Cross time to get on their feet. It gave other organizations time to get together and get here. So yes, I will say this. I don't know how to put it. The good news is that a lot of the people who were affected are folks who were able to either find shelter elsewhere, stay with friends, get hotel rooms. And then, like I said, the city stepped in to help hotel rooms. So we got people rehomed, or at least got in shelter very quickly. And, it even affected, one of my best friends, a guy I used to do a podcast with, was without power, without internet, and had a limb sticking through his roof for a few days. So it hit very close to home. And so yeah, in the 7 years I've been working as a service provider, a resource provider for the unsheltered community, this was the fastest and the most that it's hit us, and it was very hard. But we're resilient. The community responded in a big way, and so it was outstanding. I hope we never have to do it again, but to know that they'll do that.
Right.
Warms my heart.
And if you want to let people know where they can contact your particular organization for donations, why don't you provide that right now?
Yeah. So the organization Bill's talking about it's a nonprofit. It's a 501c3 that I volunteer with here in Little Rock. It's called The Van. If you want to visit our website, it's www.itsthevan.org. That's ITSTHEVAN.org. There's a place you can donate monetarily. We have an Amazon wish list set up. If you're in Arkansas and you happen to be listening to this and you're like, hey, I want to help specifically storm victims, the city of Little Rock and the city of Wynn, and I think the city of Earl, all of which were majorly affected, they all have emergency resources, emergency command centers set up. The city of Little Rock is at 7000 Murray Street in Southwest Little Rock. But you can also contact the American Red Cross. Arkansas Disaster Relief is working their butts off to do stuff. And so all of those organizations. But yeah, I'm always going to rep for the van. It's what we do. even in times of not storm, we work day in and day out to make sure that the unsheltered community, people who are experiencing homelessness, have clothes, have hygiene items, have tarps, tents, things that they can make it from one day to the next. We provide those resources and that dignity to them on a daily basis here in Central Arkansas. And we don't charge. We don't ask for an ID. We're not religious. We're not going to evangelize. They've got my big queer ass front and center doing shit. So, we take care of the community. So it's a cool project.
Well, I got to follow that. Jesus Christ. I knew I should. But we certainly do hope that with this next batch of storms, which is affecting a lot of people, hopefully you're not going to get anything close to a rerun. My wolf of the week goes out to a band. They just wrapped up their second U.S. tour, or maybe second and a half. They may have done some makeup gigs. And the band I'm talking about is XTC, but it's not XTC, it's EXTC. Little bit of history. The leader of XTC was a gentleman named Andy Partridge. Mm-hmm. And in 1981, he had 2 consecutive nervous breakdowns. And after that, they never played live again, except for like a Letterman appearance and some radio shows. But they effectively ended their existence as a live band, though the records continued. In 2020, the bassist Colin Moulding and the old drummer Terry Chambers started playing together, and from that, Terry Chambers put another band together called XTC. Now, don't worry about Andy; he actually named the group, which tells you something about his sense of humor. And, again, this is a band that did not tour since 1981. And I've been waiting that whole time, basically, to hear a lot of this music live, and was able to see them in Bucks County, Pennsylvania on Saturday night. There's a disc here that Steve just had the graphic up, XTC Live, which has some of the live versions of the songs that they performed. I believe they're going to be touring again next April in the States. It's going to be a little bit of time, but if this is music that's within your wheelhouse, and this is really quirky, intelligent music that I think has a much wider spread of interest than I think they're given, check them out. Check XTC's records out. And it was great to finally experience some of that stuff live. So that's my wolf of the week, XTC. All right, David, thank you again for joining us. We certainly hope
for having me.
When you have something else to promote, that you come back with us.
Next week, knowing his track record.
Yeah.
Actually,
given that, I'll try to expedite getting the audio of that before there's some other blockbuster thing where it will just seem strange that we weren't talking about it. But best of luck with the new titles coming out over the next few months. And
thank you.
Please keep in touch. We love having you.
Will do.
All right.
Love being here.
All right. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to listen to us, you can download us through Apple Podcasts. You can listen to us through Stitcher Radio and many of the other podcasting platforms. If you want to write to us, you can do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. If you joined us through Facebook Live, thank you. If you're watching us later on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And we'll be back real soon. Until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
If you're listening to the audio, you're gonna hear a woof and an explosion. And just as I said, we'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Woof.